right now. And lastly, in a speech where he prophesies his own death, the belief that the country is going to be okay, that it will get to the place that it needs to be. And we have missing from our politics today is that sense of optimism and hope. And it's a great speech to watch tonight.
Something to put this moment into its appropriate context, to put this moment into its appropriate anchor, I'm going to hand things over to my colleague, Brian Williams. But I first want to thank Kara Swisher, Tom Winter, Steve Schmidt is at the table with me, John Lemire, Charlie Sykes, and Zerlina. We're going to stay on this story, and please stay with us.
Nicole Wallace, thanks. And for all the folks tuning in to see Meet the Press Daily, we must explain that our attention is focused on the YouTube corporate campus, San Bruno, California, just south of San Francisco. And that is because if you've been following any of our coverage, you know already this is the latest scene in this country of the new term of art in the American lexicon, the active shooter. This is not a drill. Sadly, law enforcement has converged on the YouTube campus because of reports of shots fired. There are a few things to point out as we watch what is now going to be this familiar endless loop of aerial photography. Most of it, like what you're looking at now, live, but a lot of it will be taped from earlier when the helicopter first arrived at the location. We have seen a notable absence of urgency because this is a tech company and because this is 2018. You're going to see one thing that all of the evacuees have in common. They're all looking down. That's because everyone who works there is on their phones. That's because they're trying to communicate with their loved ones who may have heard the news and may be concerned about them. If you have a device, you've read all about this on social media. If you have a device, you've read early reports that the gunman in this case is a woman. We don't have confirmation of that. We don't have confirmation of much except what you can see on the screen, and that is that local SWAT forces in the Bay Area, we're talking 4 or 5 miles south of San Francisco, in what is a very residential seeming corporate campus. You'll see it's a green campus. You'll see grass growing on the roof of the main structures there. You'll also see this, a whole lot of law enforcement in all of the tributary streets in and out of this area. Our own Tom Winter has been listening to scanner traffic in San Bruno PD, and the San Francisco metropolitan area writ large. Tom, what are you hearing that may fill in the blanks?
Well, Brian, at this time, we're just getting really kind of morsels of information. We're not really getting a whole lot of a narrative, if you will, as far as what's going on and what's happening now. I think your observation that we're not seeing a tremendous amount of urgency at this scene is an important one. I think that shows us that that whatever it is either contained or is over as far as the shooter or shooters. You mentioned something before that is not confirmed, that it is possible that the suspect in this shooting is a woman, and I cannot think of a recent mass shooting in this country that has involved a woman. In most cases, it's a white male that we see as the shooter, and so this would certainly be a first in modern history if, in fact, the shooter here at the YouTube headquarters is in fact a woman. I can tell you that the NYPD counterterrorism unit is closely monitoring the reports of the shooting incident in San Bruno, California, here at YouTube. I can tell you from the police scanner that there have been reports of numerous people that have been transported. We're starting to get our own confirmation of that now, Brian, as we learned that Stanford Hospital is expecting 4 to 5 patients, and the Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital is also received patients from YouTube headquarters. So at this time, it appears that we certainly have several people that have been injured. We don't know what those injuries are, Brian. We don't know whether or not they're injuries from the shooting. We don't know whether or not they're actual gunshot victims. Obviously, when a shooting like this happens, sadly, as the active shooter phrase has entered our lexicon, everybody knows at this point to run if possible to get out of a possible shooting situation. And so sometimes there can be injuries associated with that. We hope that that's just the case, but right now we don't have a sort of a sense of the injuries that we're facing here, and we don't have an official all clear that whoever may have been responsible for this is in fact in custody, or has been shot themselves, or has shot themselves. So that's kind of a situation that we have right now. We know that we have a very significant law enforcement response at YouTube's headquarters, and we know that we have an incident where at least several people are injured, and we're continuing to monitoring it. I know that myself and my colleague Andrew Blankstein on the West Coast, we've been working the phones as well as listening to police chatter out there. So far, the local authorities have not transmitted information more broadly. Usually that happens, but depending upon the situation, that might not happen for a little while here. So at the moment, all we know is that there's a report of an active shooter. We know that we have injuries, and we're waiting for more information from law enforcement, as presumably they try to figure out exactly what they're dealing with and exactly what happened here.
Tom Winter, thank you very much, and keep listening. We know that listening to Skinner Traffic can be deeply unsatisfying, because at this point, after the initial reports and units have been dispatched, it becomes about status checks on individual units, SWAT units, individual patrol cars, and police personnel. The aerial pictures continue to be notable. You see kind of a still life where life kind of stopped. Some chairs scattered about, a vacant basketball court. This is regarded as one of the great worker-friendly campuses to be assigned to because it came up in the modern age of creature comforts, and mostly young people spending vast number of hours at work, so why not make it comfortable and pleasurable? You'll notice that the campus is right up against Wildlands in San Bruno. The back end of it goes right to Wildlands. There's kind of a ring road and a gate around it. Also, a few moments ago, we showed the pictures of the police doing TSA-style pat-downs, one by one. There's just, in this one cluster, there's only one officer doing this. That's to make sure that everyone is who they purport to be. That is to make sure that even though they are wearing a YouTube employee badge, even though they look for all the world like YouTube employees, that is so you can rule everything out, and a process of elimination. One of the law enforcement announcements we've received in the last few minutes is that the ATF San Francisco Field Division, which is sizable, is sending men and women there. Tom Winter, I'm told you have a detail?
Yes, Brian. Just starting to get a little bit of some information filtering through law enforcement community right now. So this is preliminary information from the scene, but the scene is still active, according to a senior U.S. law enforcement official. At this point, there are no reported fatalities at this time. So that's important. But again, this is preliminary. And as we talked about just moments ago, Brian, we have people at a hospital. So this is just preliminary information from the scene, still active, and law enforcement at this point believing that the shooter is in fact a woman, and as I told you before, that's very unusual. So we're starting to get a little bit of information from law enforcement. Again, that's from a senior U.S. law enforcement official to NBC News, that we are still dealing with an active scene, meaning that law enforcement is still in the process of going through that building, in the process of trying to get a preliminary sense of what happened. The good news so far, and again, it is early, is that there are no reported fatalities at this time, and there is a growing belief that, in fact, the shooter that they are looking at and that was involved in this incident, Brian, was a woman. So that's just the very basic information that we have at this point.
Tom, it's again hard to reconcile word that this is still an active scene with all available aerial photos, and in all the time we've been watching, I think I have seen 2 members of law enforcement walking any faster than a stroll. So perhaps where it's still active, If it's still active, it is deep within the campus, and everything else has been declared secure or locked down. But as Tom was warning, as we always warn in these situations, so many early reports can be wrong. One more note, YouTube was last in the news. We don't know that this is germane at all. With their announcement to ban videos that promote or link to websites selling firearms and accessories, including bump stocks, which allow a semi-automatic rifle to be used in effect as a machine gun. YouTube said it will prohibit videos with instructions on how to assemble firearms. As you know, if you spent any time on YouTube, no matter what your hobby or favorite thing to do is, there are thousands of videos tailored to you. And just saying that this was the last time as a corporate entity YouTube was in the news. Our justice correspondent Pete Williams standing by in our Washington bureau. He can add to this. Pete?
Brian, the federal response is very slow at this point largely because the San Bruno Police, the California Highway Patrol, and the county authorities have the lead on this. So the feds are offering their assistance, but at this stage, what they will be doing is providing any investigative work that has to be done once the building is cleared, which is the responsibility of the first responders, in this case, the local authorities. So the information flow to the federal folks that we would normally hear from right now with more details than we're getting just hasn't gone in that direction yet, because it's all one way toward the locals. But once it's cleared, then the FBI, the ATF can help the considerable authorities, considerable manpower that they have there already, do all the investigative work that has to be done to build a case, all the forensic ballistic work, where were shots fired, where did they come from, what sort of weapon, more on the suspect, and that's what the federal authorities will do. So they're basically on scene in standby mode right now. The local authorities, when they have the time. This is a standard protocol how these things work. They'll set up a command center that will coordinate all of the various agencies that are there, because you've got police, you've got county sheriffs, you've got CHP, you've got fire, you've got ambulances, you've got EMTs, you'll have the feds. So that's to come in the subsequent hours. So frankly, when something like this happens, when the federal authorities are more in the picture, we get more information flowing faster. So that's why we really, in terms of the people we normally talk to every day here in Washington, they're basically in a receive mode right now, waiting for instructions.
Pete Williams, thank you. Kara Swisher, the executive editor of Recode, a veteran journalist covering all things Silicon Valley, is with us by telephone. Kara, have you been able to add anything further since your conversation with Nicole Wallace?
Well, no, I just that the shooter had been disabled in some way, from what I understand, within the building, and that several people had been shot within the building. These are from people inside YouTube with some knowledge of what's going on. But again, you'll have to get that confirmation from police or the company itself. But they, I think it was nothing more, except that they're obviously enormously shook up by this and had not expected it. These campuses are very accessible and are very easy to get into. People, they try to create this open environment for as a workplace, a fun and interesting and very uplifting workplace. And so I think this is going to be a real blow to the way people work in Silicon Valley for sure.
Kara, I've been told since you've been talking, we've received confirmation of a female suspect down and deceased. Okay. Again, for all the kind of historic reasons Tom Winter went through, that this would be so highly unusual. Kara, you made a point I'd like to go back to. For all of us working in a Depression-era building in Midtown Manhattan that was built for the era and has been retrofitted somewhat, this YouTube campus was part of the new wave we Easterners all looked at with wonder. They had stationary bicycles and what appeared to be comfortable furniture and actual food for employees for the taking. And I'm guessing that this is right up there with among the very best.
Yeah, it is. I just sent some photographs that I was just there speaking at YouTube to the employees at an event. They just do these. Susan Wojcicki, who's the CEO, holds these talks with employees, and I went there to talk about the press and YouTube's challenges for the employees. So I sent some photographs. It's a very open environment. It's very colorful. Obviously, the YouTube logo is everywhere. They have big screens of videos. There's a slide. There's an actual slide that people slide down there. Big cafeterias, outdoor areas to eat, basketball courts, and things like that. Now, this happens to be a very small campus compared to Google, which is a very large college-like campus. This is just a building right on the street, and it's been kept there because the YouTube founders wanted it to be run separately, and Google agreed that YouTube was, even though it's owned by Google, that it should be run separately. And so they try to cultivate a slightly different culture there than other parts of Google, which are all in the same area of Mountain View, which is relatively far down south comparatively.
I'm already set up. Okay. Every time I talk to you, though, I disconnect. So I got to go back.
Since the shooting was reported, and he hasn't been able to make sure to know that all his team members are okay. So there's a lot of desperation, anxiety here among the workers. Also, there's a lot of police activity, as you can imagine. So many roads are blocked. There's a lot of traffic. We have not only
advising that the search team has done a detailed search of the first floor. It is search and secure. Maybe 21 from 3414. None of those codes are working in the rooms around us. 3414, County. 3414. Can we just get a picture of him? I'll do it because we're out of here.
That's my buddy. Good. I've got people walking in. I have to be careful with that. Don't get on 280 because it was blocked. I'm sorry, I'm shooting right now. So it's hard for me to talk. I got people in. Don't go 280.
Got confirmation from the Google security that they give consent to rail all the doors as well. Don't know which units haven't taken a railing.
Okay, do you want us to head over there? Yes. We gotta get going. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, you can. Yeah, I just wanted to see what was happening.
Stations, this is the news channel. I want to let you know that we anticipate a news briefing by police in San Bruno coming up at about 5:30 Eastern, 2:30 Pacific concerning the shooting.
This is an NBC News special report. Here's Lester Holt.
Good day. We continue to monitor the breaking developments out of Northern California. A shooting at the campus of YouTube in San Bruno A suspect, a woman, according to police, is dead. We don't have any information on other casualties other than several hospitals are said to be receiving or expecting patients. In fact, one of the hospitals holding a news conference now. Let's listen.
Correct.
One woman isn't serious, one woman isn't fair.
That's correct.
Their ages 32, 27, and what?
And 36.
36 was critical.
36 is critical. That's the male.
Is it known where these people were shot?
You mean what parts of their bodies? Yes, but I can't share that at this moment.
When you say you're expecting more people, are you expecting more people in critical condition or serious condition, or do we know?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know the conditions of the people we expect. At 3:30 this afternoon, we're going to convene again. I'll bring a trauma surgeon from our trauma practice here to explain in greater depth what the injuries are. That's right. Brent Andrew.
Brent, I just got here. Can you please
no worries.
recap?
Sure. First, we've received 3 patients. 2 female and a male. The female are in serious condition.
Okay, you're listening there to SF General, a spokesperson, we believe, Brent Andrew from SF General. We're trying to listen to exactly
Lester
what
Holt in
he's
New York,
saying,
we
but
have dipped into this
essentially,
news
there was no
conference.
known
That's Brent
updates in
Andrews, the
terms of the
spokesman for
patients
San
that they
Francisco
admitted.
General
3 to 5
Hospital. His
patients,
hospital confirming they have
within the
received
last
3
couple hours
patients
to
from this
SF
apparent shooting at YouTube headquarters. One of those patients said to be in critical condition. That's one of at least 3 hospitals we have heard from that is said to be receiving or expecting patients from this scene. We don't have any overall numbers. We do know the suspect, a woman, is deceased. But beyond that, it's hard to know what is happening inside these buildings here. There are multiple buildings on the campus of YouTube in San Bruno. It's just south of San Francisco. It was about lunch hour there, Pacific time, that the call went out of an active shooter at that campus and led that huge response. And again, a number of hospitals now receiving patients. Joe Fryer is in our Los Angeles newsroom. Joe, what do you have?
Lester, as you said, at this point, we just don't know the number of victims who were shot. We know at least 3 hospitals in the area are taking in patients. The one you just saw there, San Francisco General, that is the main level 1 trauma center in the area. So the idea is that the most critically injured may go there, assuming they can get them there safely and in time. As we heard, we think at least one of those patients is in critical condition. 4 to 5 other patients were expected at Stanford Medical Center. We do not know their conditions at all. And then 1 patient was treated for an ankle injury nearby at Kaiser Permanente in South San Francisco. So at this point, the only fatality we know of is the shooter, the female shooter. We do not know how that female shooter died, if it was at her own hand or if it was at the hands of law enforcement. Perhaps police will shed more light on that in the news conference coming up in just a little bit. Google also put out a statement. Google, of course, owns YouTube, saying that they are coordinating with authorities and will provide additional information from Google and YouTube as it becomes available. Lester?
Yeah, Joe Fryer, thanks. There are multiple news conferences happening. You saw the one at San Francisco General. We are expecting the police chief of San Bruno to go before the cameras here shortly. We're told the microphones are set up and we should get a briefing with a kind of an overall picture of what is happening here. There's the scene where we expect the police chief to join us shortly to give us the very latest. This again happening around the lunch hour in California. It's a campus like many of the social media and tech giants in the Silicon Valley. It's a campus there, areas where people can sit outside, enjoy the weather, have lunch. It's not clear which building this occurred in, but there is the map. San Bruno YouTube headquarters, just south of San Francisco, and actually San Bruno abuts the San Francisco International Airport. All the reports we've had have been of injured people taken to hospitals. We don't know what is transpiring inside. We do know that despite the fact they believe it's a lone suspect who is now deceased, we did see groups of employees, presumably employees, being led out of the building with their hands in the air, a procedure we have seen time and time again at mass shootings around this country, but people brought in and taken to areas that police had designated safe zones. I want to bring in Pete Williams now, our justice correspondent who's monitoring all this along with me. What is the response to this and where does this go?
Well, where it goes is that the federal authorities will now lend their assistance in terms of investigating who this woman was and what led up to the shooting. They've undoubtedly will at some point learn her identity. Once they confirm that, they will go to a court and get permission to search her home or apartment. They'll try to figure out how she got there. Did she drive? Was she driven by somebody else? That's the work they'll do.
All right, Pete, thank you very much. I understand a news conference has now begun. I don't know if this is the police one. Yes, this is the police chief, Chief Barberini.
Or suspect. Upon arrival, officers encountered numerous employees fleeing from the building. It was very chaotic, as you can imagine. We did encounter one victim with an apparent gunshot wound towards the front of the business as we arrived. Several minutes later, while conducting a search of the premises, officers located a second individual with a gunshot wound that appears to may have been self-inflicted. We are still working on confirming that. Two additional victims were located several minutes later at an adjacent business. The extent of all of the injuries of our victims are unknown right now. They were all transported for emergency medical care, but they are all unknown. So if I missed that, we have 4 victims who have all been transported for gunshot-related injuries, and we have one subject who's deceased inside the building with a self-inflicted wound that at this time we believe to be the shooter, but we're still following up on that. Multiple law enforcement agencies have responded to assist. We're very grateful for everyone's help and assistance. We could not have responded and accomplished this without everybody's help. This is an active event and an active investigation, and numerous law enforcement personnel from numerous different local agencies are still conducting a search of the business just to make sure that that it is clear. We conducted a quick, immediate search of the premises when the first officers arrived as pursuant to our active shooter protocol. And after that search was concluded, now we're going through with a methodical, slow search just to make sure that we cover all the bases. The time of the next press update, but we'll put that out as soon as we have that information.
Dion, ABC 7.
I'm sorry?
Dion, on ABC 7, I'm hearing from YouTube employees that there were 2 shooters, a man and a woman. Can you confirm?
No, I cannot confirm that.
Was the deceased a man or a woman?
It's a female. Yes.
You don't know the conditions of the victims at this point, or are they survivable injuries?
My understanding is that they've been transported and they're being treated for injuries that are treatable. We're hoping for the best, obviously.
Are there more people inside the building, or?
My understanding is the building has been evacuated. There are people in the immediate area. We're obviously trying to contact a large amount of people to try to identify and gain some information from witnesses at the scene. So you can imagine it's a monumental task with the number of employees that work inside the building.
Chief, can you tell us about what weapon or weapons were
I'm sorry?
Can you tell us about what weapon or weapons were recovered?
I don't have that information. I'm sorry.
Do you have police or something, the sheriff, who else is?
We have. I haven't taken inventory of all the agencies here. There are numerous agencies. We work well with our neighboring partners, and we're grateful that they're here. But there's a lot of them.
And do you have a gender of the shooter?
Yeah, I want to clarify that we did locate a victim with what we believe to be a self-inflicted gunshot wound. It's a female, but the investigation is still ongoing before we can put all the pieces together.
Is this person an ex-employee?
I don't have any information regarding that.
Are you looking for another shooter?
We are clearing the building and searching the building in a slow, methodical manner like we would do anyway. So we haven't eliminated that possibility, but we have no information to suggest that there's somebody else in there that we're looking for.
Where are the employees now? We saw them walking down the street.
Yeah, a lot of employees self-evacuated, as you can imagine. We've identified a group that we want to talk to, and we have staging areas where our detectives are reaching out to them and interviewing them. So we're trying to do as orderly as we can, but a lot of people, pretty hectic scenario. So it's a task.
Are there still people in that building that are with YouTube that are there now besides the ones that you're identified in question?
No, I believe my understanding is that the building has been evacuated, so they're all outside of that building.
Okay, how many people are you talking about here?
Several hundred, a few hundred. I'm sorry, a few hundred. It was my understanding.
In what floor was she?
I don't know.
And was her boyfriend there? That's what.
Oh, I have no idea. I don't know the circumstances surrounding this at all. I don't want to eliminate any possibility. I don't know any of that for sure. Like I said, this is still active. We're still investigating this as I'm speaking to you. So there's a lot of things that I just simply don't know right now.
And you shared that the shots started in the courtyard. Do you know anything?
I don't have that information. All right. I will try to get you an update as soon as we can once we know more. But I think that I've given you almost everything that we know at this point, so appreciate it.
Updates for the next news conference?
Yeah, when we know, I don't want to give you a time because I may not have a lot for you. So when we can identify a time that's appropriate to come back and update you again, we'll do that immediately.
How will you put that information?
We'll probably put that out through our media list and through social media.
Sorry, Chief. We understand from one employee.
All right, we've been listening in on a news conference. That's Chief Ed Barberini of the San Bruno Police Department, explaining exactly what they know has occurred at the YouTube headquarters today. The suspect, a woman, is deceased. As he describes, there were 3 other gunshot victims who were wounded. They have been transported to hospitals. Those numbers don't necessarily jibe with the numbers of what hospitals were expecting. But for now, we know a suspect apparently dead of a self-inflicted gunshot and 3 other gunshot victims being treated. I want to go to Joe Fryer right now, who has been monitoring all this along with me. Joe, as I said, the hospitals, 3 other hospitals were reporting a number that totals more than that.
Yeah, and we have to keep in mind, we don't know what those injuries are that people were taken to the hospital for. Keep in mind, it's a tense situation. So we do know for sure, and we've just received more information, that 3 patients were taken to the Level 1 Trauma Center, that San Francisco General Hospital. So those might be the 3 gunshot victims. We know 1 male is in critical condition, 1 female is in serious condition there, another female is in fair condition. We were told 4 to 5 other people were taken to another medical center, but we don't know their conditions, and we don't know if those were gunshot wounds or some other injury they might have suffered. And then a 3rd person was taken to a hospital. We do know that was just an ankle injury. So that might be the key issue here, is what were the injuries? Why were people taken to the hospital? We do know that 3 people were taken to the main Level 1 Trauma Center. They are in critical, serious, and fair conditions right now. Lester?
All right, Joe, thank you very much. The chief unable to describe what kind of weapon was used, and certainly nothing about motives. They as always, in these cases, they can search the area and secure the area, but they believe 1 shooter, and again, that deceased woman. Let me bring back Pete Williams. Pete?
Well, I think the good news, if you can use such a term in a situation like this, is only 1 fatality. If that's how things go in the coming hours, if the patient who's critical remains critical and improves, then given the way that the witness described hearing all these gunshots, to know that this is the result is certainly encouraging, if that's again the right word. So 2 things are happening now, and why the chief said this is an active investigation. Yes, the police have been through the building quickly, but now they'll go very methodically, room to room. This is the standard protocol in something like this, to make absolutely certain of 2 things. Number 1, that there's nobody else that is armed and firing shots or holding anyone at gunpoint. And 2, that there are no other victims that they've missed. So those are 2 critical things that they'll have to do in an extensive room-to-room search, and that's what's going on in those buildings that you're looking at right now. Then, in terms of the second, is the investigation that will begin at the scene to look at how many shots were fired, where did they come from, where did they go, all of that ballistic and forensic work that has to be done. And then third, trying to figure out who this woman is and why she did it.
All right, Pete Williams, thank you very much. And the way the chief described it, it sounds like 1 of the victims they encountered, officers actually encountered outside, and they would discover the others as they went further into the building. But again, we're at that point now. The facts are coming in dribbles right now. We're going to continue to tell you what we know and what we don't know. We'll have full coverage, and we see you back on the air here for NBC Nightly News. For now, I'm Lester Holt, NBC News, New York. Good day.
Who said 4? SF. You said 4 people? This is the San Bruno Police Department? Okay.